This is Dark Warrior coming at you, playing some Accept, and the song is called Balls to the Wall. Yep, here, this is Dark Warrior again. Yeah, I want to continue my take on, the African immigrants, these mud huts that, white supremacists like to call them. Mud huts, jungle, jigaboos, a whole bunch of demeaning names, just to expose racial truth, as they call it. These mud huts that never created civilization, aren't capable of complex thinking. Well, how come these mud huts come into these colleges and get degrees, more of them get advanced degrees than African Americans, white Americans, everybody in this country, I might add. It seems to me that proves my point that blacks in general or have a higher tendency not to take educational seriously as their white American counterparts, and definitely not like their black immigrant counterparts, which take education a lot seriously than everybody. And that also includes Asians and the other minorities, and of course the European nationals too. But I'm focusing on the African immigrants because they have achieved the highest attainment of education in terms of percentages. And all this bullshit about it's affirmative action, well, you can argue that in the admissions process if you want to. I mean, I can have counter arguments to that, but even if we concede that, the bottom line is that they don't offer bachelor's degrees in college based upon quota systems or even affirmative action systems. It's based upon merit, complete merit, or merit relative to everybody else in that college pool. But I want to go back to my point about affirmative action, not affirmative action, but education. This fact of black immigrants, all black immigrants, whether West Indian, African, achieving higher grades, achieving more percentages of them graduating, having degrees, having advanced degrees, that proves also shows you that education in predominantly black schools, we need to look at the black leadership. In most of these schools, there is predominantly black leadership. I come from Rochester, and I would say at least half, if not all, at least 50, most likely 75% of the elected officials are black. I mean, definitely in Harlem, I would be surprised if there was predominantly white educational leadership there, in terms of the superintendent, the principals, and the teachers may be a different story. Okay, I mean, we gotta really look at that leadership. We can't just continue to talk about the government spending more money, because if there's a culture in the African American community, which is not, I'm not saying to say all, but a greater tendency, let's be real here, a strong tendency just not to take education so seriously and think that being educated is for white people, which I'm not going to say all, but many, it's not going to do anything. You just probably just have more graffiti and more destruction. I'm not going to say that, all these schools in DC are going to be gang, there's shoot-ups and, fire bombs. But even the schools that don't have a gang problem, they're just not going to respect education. Until education becomes a serious matter in the black youth, it won't mean shit. And that also goes, and I also want to make the point that, integration has its benefits, but if the attitude if the attitude in the African American community, in terms of the black youth especially, I don't think necessarily the parents, maybe the parents, but I'm talking about the black youth. But you also have to talk about the parents because the parents are going to set the example. So I have to say in general, if it's just, education, oh well. It's not a serious thing like how it is in the Asian American community. You can integrate all you want, and blacks are still going to have lower test scores. Listen, white supremacists, listen, because I know that you guys will say, oh, these integrated schools, they still fail. Oh, we did integration, and these black students still failed. It's a genetic basis. Well, I'm just going to tell you this. Just because you integrate a school, a suburban school with inner city minorities and blacks, does not mean the attitude of education has changed within that culture. Bullshit. So I think you guys need to get the different statistics, because those are not impressive to me at all. And I would say that still, the gap still decreases. Okay, yeah, there's a gap. There's still the educational gap, but still it decreases when you integrate the school, probably superficially, if the attitude of education is the same as it was when it was segregated. And I do also want to mention that there are some black schools, because I know some people are going to say, well, not all black schools are horrible. And that's a good point, because we don't want to, sometimes if you keep, pointing out the negative, it continues to stay negative. There are some black schools that have turned it around and have met, state standards and are as good as many of the white private schools. But they did it by destroying a culture that says we don't give a shit about education. And I think there was a story about a black superintendent that took some tough measures in one of these schools and turned that around. It may not be the most elite school in America, but it's, a decent school. And I mean, the odds were against them. So to me, I'm impressed more by those schools than, schools that are like, for example, in Brighton, New York, where, they didn't have to have those type of challenges. I'm not hating on them. I'm just, I just feel that's more impressive. But we really need to, this African immigrant thing. Yes, I use this to attack white supremacists and many race realists. I'm not saying that race realists are necessarily white supremacists, but I use that. But in the same token, we need to look at the African American community as well. I mean, blame Whitey. You can't blame Whitey for some of the things that you can't blame every single problem on the Whitey or the white man concerning education. That would just be, you're gonna make yourself look like a whining loser if you think about it. And then this is the type of shit that white supremacists take advantage of. And that yes, they sincerely believe that you're inferior. They don't think they're full of shit. But that's just something to think about. Again, there is no explanation by white supremacists that of these black immigrants that many of them come from tribal Africa, who succeed educationally. They do very well. So, in that respect, I will see you guys later.